Hey Youth Middle, it's Mr. Sam. I've actually got drill this weekend, so I'm going to be teaching you with this video, but I'm so excited because I think it's a message that every one of us can relate to and actually walk away with something. But it's this idea, as we're talking about serving one another, it's this idea that we first need to address the part of our hearts that thinks the grass is greener on the other side. If you've never heard that term, it just means when we look at something or someone else, we think, oh, if only I had that. Like maybe you look at someone and you're like, oh, if I could play basketball like they could play, man, that would be amazing. Or if I could be so confident and talk like them, or just be funny like them, or maybe you look at their clothes or someone's clothes rack. If I had those clothes, or maybe you're like, man, if my parents were just, they let me do more fun things and like their parents do, whatever it is, maybe it's something or maybe it's someone, and you think, if I had that, my life would be so much better. Well, here's the sad news. It happens to all of us. There's not a single person that can say they don't run into this. In fact, it's happening at my house right now. See, Georgia and Everly. Everly's the oldest, Georgia's the middle child. They share a room, and they have what's called a trundle bed. So it's like a regular bed, and then underneath it, you can pull out the mattress, and there's two mattresses. Well, every day they switch. So one girl will sleep on the bottom, the next day she'll sleep on the top. And the reason we do that is because there was always fights, like every single night, a fight for who would be on the top bunk and or top bed. And all of a sudden something changed like a week ago. Georgia just decided, you know what? I'm gonna have the bottom bunk. Now again, it was like always such a big deal who got the top. But when Georgia started sleeping on the bottom, you would not believe it, but Everly has now started like begging to have the bottom. And I realized it's really just because she doesn't have it. So the bottom, which used to be the worst, is now the best bunk and bed in the house. And it even happens to me. Like, if we had more time, I would tell you all about this truck that I have. I got it a little over 3 years ago. And let me tell you, when I got this thing, it was incredible. Like, I loved everything about it. I was taking pictures of it. I was bragging about, like, I texted my brother. I was like, no way, dude, I got such a great deal on it. Like, this thing's amazing. And the longer I've had it, the more that I've wanted a different truck. And I don't know why, other than there's this part of me that thinks that something that I don't have is better. Now, here's what I want to do. We are going to read a passage or a part of the Bible about a guy that this happened to. And then in your small groups, you guys are going to read a passage that Jesus gives us an example of how to kind of fix this in our hearts. So, with that being said, we're going to pause this video right after I tell you where our sword drill is. So our sword drill is in Luke chapter 15, verse 11. Again, Luke chapter 15, verse 11. Pause, unpause. Okay, you guys are there. Luke 15, 11, and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to read this and just talk about it a little bit. I'm going to go pretty quick. So, this is the parable of the lost son, or the prodigal son. Jesus continued, he was teaching people, and he said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property among them. See, back then, you didn't get your inheritance until your dad passed away. Well, this guy says, I want my stuff more than I want you. You're as good as dead to me. Not long after that, the younger son got all that he had and set out for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living, and he had spent everything. Well, then there was a famine, a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. His money ran out. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who had sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Back then, especially for Jewish people, pigs were the dirtiest animal that you could think of, and they're really gross. They really are. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Like, can you imagine you're so hungry, you're feeding your dog, and you're like, this kibbles and bits. Like, maybe I should try it. Like, I'm that hungry that I might eat some dog food. That's what's happening here. It's crazy. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. He said, I'll set back to go to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he went up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, kissed him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Here's the moral of that story. There's this son who thought that through money and making whatever choices he wanted to, he could be happy. And he found out pretty quick it doesn't last. So the grass in his case was not greener at all. But I want to read a second part. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and he asked what was going on. Well, your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out to him and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who squandered your property with horrible choices, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him? My son, the father said, you were always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours who was dead is alive again. He was lost and he's found. The whole point. Now, you could talk a whole lot about those two passages, those two parts. But one brother thought that things could make him happy. His focus wasn't on his dad. His focus wasn't on others. His focus was completely on himself. If I just fill my life with all these fun things, my life will be better. His focus was on himself. And he found out it didn't make him happy. And his brother was focused on himself too. Even though he was the good kid and he was doing all the right things, his focus wasn't on being a good son. His focus wasn't on on others and his father. Instead, his focus was just on himself. Here's the main point I want to give you, and then I'm going to let you guys go for small groups. Your life will never be full until you learn to empty it out to other people, until you learn to focus on other people's needs and not just your own. So here's what I want you to do. I want you and your small group leaders to go to John 13, verse 1, and talk about the example that Jesus set. You guys are going to use the SOAP method. You'll read part of the scriptures, and then you're going to talk about what you saw, your observations. What made you go, what? What made you go, wow, that was cool? And then afterwards, ask yourself, how can I apply this to my own life? And then wrap up in prayer. Love you guys. It's going to be an awesome time. See you next week.